there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, a sliding T-bevel. Well, I thought that this would be a fun idea for those of you who like to make your own tools. And this is a marking tool, which means that just like a jig, you need to make it as perfect as you possibly can, because any imperfections are going to be passed on to your work, and we really don't want to do that. So the first thing we need to do is prepare our stock, and for that we're going to be using 1/4" walnut, and you'll want to joint one edge of it to make sure that it's perfectly flat. Now that you have that edge jointed and you've tested it with a straight edge, we're going to cut our stock. And what we need for the handle of this T-bevel is going to be 2 pieces that are 1 inch wide by 6 inches long. Well, we have our pieces cut 1/4 inch thick, 1 inch wide, and 6 inches long. We have 2 of them, one for each side of our bevel. Now, there is another piece that we need, and that will be a piece that's just like this. And this is 1/8 of an inch thick. We have squared off one end, and 1/4 of an inch in, we've cut it off at a 45-degree angle. So now that we have that set, we can line up our pieces and glue them together. And the way they're going to get glued up is just like this. This little 1/8 inch 45-degree piece will go right here at the end, and then it will get sandwiched in between another piece of 1/4 inch. The important thing to remember here is that everything lines up, that these edges are exactly parallel. Just like a jig, remember, you have to make it perfect. So we are going to line these up. We're going to use a straight edge to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly. We're going to glue it together, clamp it, and put it aside to dry. Well, now while we're waiting for this to dry, we can put that aside and concentrate on the next item or the next piece that we need. And for that, we're going to be using aluminum flat bar. And this aluminum flat bar is 1 inch wide and 1/8 of an inch thick. What we're going to do is we're going to cut one end at a 45, and then we're going to place it into our assembly here in this slot and mark off where we need to cut this end, and then we'll do that. How do you cut flat bar? Well, you could do it with a hacksaw, or you could do it with the table saw, like what I'm going to do. Now, once your handle assembly is dry, you'll take the blade that you cut and place it inside that gap so that it sits nice and flush in there. And once you get everything lined up, you will drill a 17/64 hole centered on the 1 inch side, and we're going to come down about 5/8 of an inch from the end. Well, we now need to cut a slot in our aluminum blade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a center line here 3 inches down from this one. We're going to drill another hole the same diameter as this, and then we're going to join the lines here, put a marking on it, and cut it at the scroll saw using a fine-tooth blade. Well, I have a number 3 reverse tooth blade, and we're just going to cut along our lines and cut out that center section to give us our groove. Well, although the scroll saw was working, it was quite a slow process. They're not metal cutting blades that I was trying, and although you can get them for the scroll saw, I don't have any. So, no big deal. I'm just going to use the metal cutting disc on a Dremel and finish off these cuts. And now we're just going to let that cool, as the aluminum does heat up quite a bit. Okay, so while we're waiting for that aluminum to cool, I just want to point out a couple things. And number one, we did have the problems with the scroll saw. No big deal. How else are you going to know unless you try, right? I'll probably be looking into getting some metal cutting blades in case I do a project like this in the future. The discs on the Dremel, they work just fine. I actually ground down 3 of those discs cutting that groove, and one of them just imploded during the cut. At that point in time, when it ricocheted off my face, I was glad that I had my face shield on. So PPE strikes again, guys, to save this pretty face and keep me looking good. So now that we've got that cut and it's cooled, we want to file down the inside to level out that groove. Now, if you were careful with your cutting, it shouldn't take too much filing to get this smooth. And you'll know that you've filed it enough when you can take a 1/4 bolt and slide it freely from end to end. And that brings us to our next step, which is material. You need a 1/4 thread by 1 inch long bolt, and as well you're going to want a number 1/4 thread wing nut. And once you finish filing, we can put this thing together. Once your filing is done, you can put the whole thing together, and all you do is place your blade inside of your holder, making sure that the 45s line up so that it nests nicely in there. And then you want to place your 1/4 bolt through and then your wing nut on top. But now we're not quite done. What we want to do at this point now is I want to shape the end here where the wing nut is. So I'm going to get my circle template. I'm going to draw a 1 inch diameter circle at the end. And while this thing is all nutted together and held tightly in place, I'm going to take it over to the belt sander and I'm going to sand this all around it to make everything mesh together. . 'Cause 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 ' So now that I've got the end shaped, I've just used a little bit of Autosol polish, which is just basically a metal polish, and I'm giving this a good rub down just to clean it up and make it look better. That's the only reason I'm doing it. You don't need to do this step, but honestly, look at that. Why would you not want to do that step? That's awesome. Okay, so we've got the blade all nicely polished, and now it's just a matter of assembly. And you take your blade, place it into your bevel gauge or your sliding T-bevel, whatever you want to call it. Your 1-inch bolt goes through, and then there you go, your wing nut. We're just going to give this a light sanding all the way around, being careful not to take off the flat edges that we went so far as to run them through the jointer to get them perfect. And there you have it, my friends. Once we get this thing sanded up a little bit, that is one beautiful shop-made T-bevel right there. That is gorgeous. I love it. And there you have it. A sliding T-bevel. Guys, honestly, check this out. This thing is beyond gorgeous. It works fantastic. I have some very expensive store-bought versions of this, and I have to tell you that this is just as cool, if not cooler, mostly because I made it. You guys are going to see this getting quite a bit of use in the shop. Honestly, if you get the chance to make one of these, do it. The amount of material probably cost all in all about maybe $2.50. Now, don't forget that you can adjust this. You can make this longer if you like. Depending on the aluminum flat bar, you could make it wider. You're only limited really to the stock that you have. But what if you don't have an aluminum or any of that, any basically access to those things? Make it out of wood. The only difference between using wood and using metal for the blade is I wouldn't use a marking knife on this if you were using a wooden blade. But if you have the access to the aluminum and you can make one, this is awesome. Cutting the groove, a bit of an experiment there. It didn't work so well on the scroll saw, but you know what? That's part of being out in the shop. Sometimes we got to try it to know if it's going to work or not. There's nothing more satisfying in the shop, guys, as a woodworker than to make your own tools and to have them as functional as what this thing is. This thing is spectacular. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this week's show. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell so you get notifications of future episodes of the program. I really want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope you're going to join me next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.